All right, hello and welcome to week 3 of child growth and development. Today is sadly going to be my least favorite week, um, mainly because we have to talk about theories and theorists, which as I go through this, you'll notice I pay less attention to a lot of the different theories and more want you to think about how each of these theories built on one another and what pieces are still important when it comes to child development as we know it today. And hopefully, I know last week was long, and I actually acknowledged that in a lot of your exit tickets that it was a little bit long, and I felt that beforehand, so I apologize, and I'll try, if not make this shorter, to have it broken up a little bit more. Okay? So our agenda is very simple. Course updates, that's a bit more intensive. I have a few, I think. I might be thinking of the other class. We're going to review and recap. I want us to come back to the doll video. I read all of your 2-minute essays. They were wonderful. And then we'll come back and wrap up trauma and the developing brain, because I do want you to know why it's important and what happens in the long term. Then the bulk of today will be covering theories and theorists, because that was the bulk of chapter 3. And it is important to have that background regardless of where you end up in with relation to early childhood development. It is part of where we are today. And then wrap up and exit ticket, which you will have as soon as this is posted. All right, let me fix this. Because I can move it. So pieces I want you to pay attention to right now. I'm going to go to here, YouTube channel. I will post the link every week, but I've realized that just having my own YouTube channel that you can access will probably be the easiest way for me to post videos. But I'll make sure that each individual video I post for each week is posted in the weekly folder. And in addition to that, you have to watch the videos every week. This is not an in-person synchronous, which means we could be in an online course where we still meet via Zoom, but we're not. We're doing this asynchronous, which means we do not meet. That doesn't mean that watching these videos is a recommendation. It is a requirement. And if I need to, I will start to ask questions that pertain to just the videos to ensure that you're watching and the exit tickets can no longer be anonymous, even though that's what I prefer. So that's a very important part of this. You need to watch the videos in their entirety, but also you need to complete your chapter quiz every week. I'm going to start tracking when quizzes have been submitted, but they're due on Fridays. And then I wanted to also make a note. Last week, I made last week's quiz anonymous, which I didn't say, but I wanted you all to have a chance to do the work and see how you did. But just attempting last week's quiz, you will have 100. That is not the case for chapter 3. I have to go, I don't know if I can now. I don't really know how to, I couldn't figure it out. But I will need to fix all of your grades, because unless you are 100% correct, you will get a 0. I couldn't figure out how to do partial credit for that being the entire quiz of matching. You're basically matching theories to their descriptions, which means I would recommend you complete the quiz for chapter 3 immediately after watching this video. Okay? But if you get a 0, don't fret. I'm going to go fix all of those grades so they reflect what you actually did. And it also incredibly important, the discussion board, although you all have done very well, I've found it's a little bit more difficult in my other course. And then the exit ticket on the recorded lecture. Sorry, my laptop has a tendency to overheat, so I have to put something underneath it. Hold on, we're gonna have to turn my camera off so this isn't an issue. All right. Sorry about that. Next, I want you to be aware that your test for next month is due on the 27th. The actual test, which will be mostly essay questions, is going to be in Blackboard, available for you to see what the questions are at the beginning of the month, okay? Because I want you to have time to work through it, and I want everyone to do well. Although these are due at the end of the semester, I think it's important to start thinking about them. In this course, you have 3 observations you need to do: an analysis of play, which is really for a birth through 8 setting, a preschool observation, and an infant observation. If you are struggling to figure out where those are going to take place, please let me know. If you currently work in a setting where you have access to these, you may do the observation while you are working. I highly encourage that. If not, there are lots of other options for where you can observe. You just need to ask me and I can give you specific ones for your location and whichever one you're looking for. There used to be play groups for infants and toddlers, but those are harder to find these days because early intervention doesn't get reimbursed for those as well as other services. But preschools, there are tons of them. That shouldn't be too difficult. And similarly, analysis of play, if you have kids that play together who are between from birth to 8 years old, then that could be your analysis of play as well. Of course, I'd need to look at specifics to make sure, but I'm not going to make it more difficult. I simply want you to make sure you have access to what you need for the assignments, okay? And I just think it's really helpful if I were you to just review the syllabus that is on Blackboard, because I make adjustments regularly. Although I haven't to this one in a while, I would review it, make sure nothing is missed, and let me know if you think I need to add something, okay? All right. Next. Oh yeah, see, I always get ahead of myself. Again, begin thinking about your observations. Let me know if you have concerns about where you'll be conducting your observation. All right, review and recap. So my title is Child Development and Systemic Racism. That's a lot of what you're seeing, in that much of what children are experiencing is because the systems in our society ensure that people of color feel less than. And then we'll talk about how trauma affects the developing brain in the long term, because I think that's important to understand why we need to address these things as soon as possible. And keep in mind that there might be so much going on that explains why a student is behaving the way that they are. So I read all of your 2-minute essays, and I was fascinated to hear your reactions. A lot of them were so accurate. Children are like sponges. They are. That's why parents often need to be so careful with what they say, because it can be repeated. Watching this video, I cried. This sentiment was actually echoed several times, and I am not surprised, sad and disappointed by today's society. How is it that in a society we don't have laws prohibiting interrace relations, or we don't have laws keeping segregation, but we do still have these feelings of lesser than? I can't express how completely heartbreaking it was. Yeah, again, similar. How children are taught to view themselves. And there are a few that were like this that I want to comment on. I won't even say it's taught, because it's almost never directly taught. It is always, and many of you commented on this, again, disgusting that we have to see this. really it's what is around us in our environment. This one was hard. You can watch as the children realize they're not talking about the baby dolls, but themselves when he asks, "Which looks like you?" Which is a very difficult, again, when I was talking about this video, I definitely mentioned how it's not an experiment I would wanna do because there could be detrimental effects to the children involved, but it was done, and we have this information. And we do see a very clear change in the children's dispositions or temperament as soon as the question shifts from some abstract concept not about them to directly asking about them and them realizing, "I am that doll that I've been commenting on." This is probably the best taught, more like secretly, subliminally, these messages have been sent to them, and I like that society's prejudice and racist undertones contributed to the way these children responded, and that's more accurate of it's not overt racism, it's covert. No child should believe they're good or bad solely because of the color of their skin, and I think we all believe that, right? But it's not even about people telling children they're good or bad. It's more about what they see when they're looking at people of different colors. Surprised and heart-shattering, clearly so damaging to the young. I love this. Children are not born like this, and that is true. And it's sad because these are such young children, but what it also teaches you that I think is critical is how much happens in the first few years of life. How important it is that we are careful with the messages that we send to children of all races, because if this is how and I think what's important to also think about, and I think about this as a white woman, is if this is how our children of color are responding to these messages, how are children who are white responding to these messages? Are they internalizing this as I am better? That's not what we want. We want I am different, right? We want everyone to that's what I want. I want everyone to acknowledge I am different because that doesn't place any value on any person's color or ethnicity, any of those factors that shouldn't lead to feelings of disgust over something that's central to your own identity. Um, and this is true. I loved your reactions, all of them. Some I know, some of you mentioned how you wish this hadn't even been an experiment with the children, which I also talked about as this is not an experiment that you might see in the US because we have ethics review boards who protect vulnerable populations like children. Um, However, experiments can happen if they involve vulnerable populations if we have protocols for addressing potential detrimental effects or bad things that could happen. Um, so that's one piece. But what I also think is important to acknowledge as a white woman is that I watch this as someone who did not experience this and could not have. I mean, in the same way as these children. I am a white woman who, um, likely because of my family and the fact that I do have this color skin, it is reasonable that place I might place more, value on whiteness in terms of, like, what I am attracted to. But what I think might be hard is if you are a person of color and you watch this video and you think, "Wait, did that happen to me? Is that ho" there could be this crisis of identity or this just sadness of, is this if you have kids and you're a person of color, is this what my children are experiencing? And in some ways, it's good. You could address it. In other ways, it's sad because then you think, oh, you might feel like you did this. And I want to make it clear that a single parent can have quite a, parents do have an impact on their kids' development, but them alone are not what lead these messages to be sent. Because I think if you ask the parents of any of those kids, they would say, "I didn't say that we're less than. I didn't say blonde and blue-eyed is more beautiful." In fact, I think they would say, "We appreciate our culture." But because they're in an area where they might be surrounded by white people, or really mainstream culture is so white, it might be a little different. So things I wanna think about. I just wanna thank you for watching that video and writing about it because it was very important, okay? But ultimately, the main lesson I want you to take is that our identities, this is central to our identities, and if we're wondering why some I didn't personally, but I know of this, um, there are a lot of individuals who grew up in predominantly white communities, but are not white, who really assimilated to the white culture because that was so prevalent, and didn't have the opportunity to connect to that other piece. I will use a student from a previous class I taught, so a college student, explained that they were both white and Vietnamese. And it was during a diversity course I was teaching that the student said, I never really thought about it very much because it's just not prevalent in my life, but I kind of wish I had. And more, it's just most students in these settings don't have even the opportunity. And it's our job as educators to make sure they do have those opportunities in a classroom setting to say, this is who I am, this is my background, and I'm proud of it, and it's beautiful. That's what I think you should take from this if you are someone who is curious about the effects and wants to support children positively through their really identity development. Okay? Next. Now that part was a little traumatic, right? That is a bit of trauma or could have been from some sort of trauma or could lead to. Here we're going to talk about the existence of trauma and what happens in development, and I just realized optimize. Okay, perfect. Because I'm going to play a video clip. So this is really about the developing brain and what happens with trauma as life progresses. And I think it's a very helpful video.
Brain development is much more than a story about biology.
Oh no. My speakers have changed. All right. Let's hope my microphone still works. Actually, I'm gonna stop the video for a second just to make sure my microphone works. So let's